A new study of NASA data says there are billions and billions of planets similar to Earth in the Milky Way alone.
I'm absolutely sure that we are not alone in this universe.
We want the United States government to stop perpetuating the myth that all UFOs can be explained away in down-to-earth and conventional terms. Instead, our country needs to reopen its official investigation that it shut down in 1969.
We had ground visual, ground radar, airborne visual, and airborne radar confirmation of some of these sightings.
She's also the Director of Investigations for the Coalition for the Freedom of Information. Leslie, thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first, what are you trying to achieve with this book here?
Well, Alana, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you. The main thing I'm trying to do is establish credibility for this subject, which is so misunderstood by the general public and by the culture at large. And the point is that I am bringing forward extremely high-level officials from around the world that have documented, as you said earlier, official events, officially documented events, where these physical objects are present. They show up on radar, they leave marks on the ground. There is a physical phenomenon in the sky.
A UFO in China's skies forced Zhoushan Airport to stop operations on July 7th. Outbound flights were grounded after the unidentified flying object was detected by a flight crew. The incident has captured the attention of Chinese media. Theories about the UFO's identity are burning up on the internet as well. They include everything from a hidden U.S. bomber to an elaborate man-made hoax. For now, the UFO continues to be a mystery.
Time to find out what the truth really is that's out there. We ought to do it really because it's right. We ought to do it because the American people, quite frankly, can handle the truth. And we ought to do it because it's the law.
We have over 450 military and intelligence witnesses. They range from generals and brigadier generals to air traffic controllers and strategic air command personnel in the Air Force to civilian people in the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, to astronauts and cosmonauts.
He had one incident that he would pick to convince people like me that aliens have indeed made contact with Earth.
That's a tough question because, it's the weight of the evidence, and it's like J. Allen Hynek, who is the Air Force Blue Book guy. He said, look, it's an embarrassment of riches. We have so much material. We have so much information. But if you take for one case that we have in the Disclosure Project, and that's a man who was the senior guy at the FAA, and they were tracking this object over Alaska, and it was at one point in the sky, and in one sweep of the radar, it would be 40, 50 miles away, moving completely non-linearly, not like an airplane. And we have the radar tape, we have the pilot report, we have all the evidence from the airline and the government. And this whistleblower who came forward, John Callahan, he said, I'm one of the senior officials in the government that not only have the evidence, but was part of a cover-up to keep the American
10 years
people
ago,
ignorant
standing
about
out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
Governor Simonton is referring to what is now known as the Phoenix Lights, an object videotaped by many and seen by thousands over several nights in the Arizona sky in 1997.
Major sighting here.
It was described by witnesses as larger than a football field and silent.
And I suspect that unless the Defense Department proves us otherwise, that it was probably some form of an alien spacecraft.
A strange spiralling white light was spotted in the early morning sky over Sydney, with even sceptical witnesses wondering if it was a UFO. The unusual sight was recorded by hundreds of people from Victoria north to Queensland.
It appeared just before 6 o'clock this morning.
That's a UFO, I'm telling you.
A spiral in the sky around a bright light.
I mean, what in the hell was it?
Malcolm Richardson saw it move from west to east, disappearing into the sunrise.
It was actually rotating and throwing off a vapour, glowing vapour, in a spiral that was getting bigger.
He was not alone. Early morning surfers, farmers, truckies grabbed their phone cameras, still cameras, web cameras.
It's just the most astounding thing. I'm looking at the window now trying to see if it's come back or not.
From central Queensland to Melbourne, along the east coast, people shared a close encounter.
And this thing was moving at a rapid rate.
I thought, gee, that's so unusual.
I was just dumbfounded.
The Bureau of Meteorology confirmed it wasn't a weather phenomenon. Air traffic control say they didn't pick up their radar, and that looks 14 kilometres into the sky. And the radio telescopes near Canberra confirmed that it wasn't in deep space, so that leaves Earth's orbit.
I'm convinced after studies since 1958 that the evidence is overwhelming that planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft.
Even though there's clearly no evidence, I want to emphasize this, that these extraterrestrials now, it's clear to me that what's going on is that they're very concerned that at the time that humanity reached the ability to go into space, early space exploration, 50s, we also had already developed weapons of mass destruction and thermonuclear and hydrogen bombs and stuff. And that the coincidence of that, the coming together of those two things, put a big red flag over Earth. And so if you look at the databases from the 50s, 60s, 70s on forward, not only in the United States, but in Great Britain, in the Soviet Union, in China, that wherever we had space, aerospace, and nuclear facilities, there were a lot of these so-called UFOs being seen.
There were documents that I have seen that refer to the Roosevelt having several instances of UFO flyovers, and particularly after they took on board nuclear weapons.
Now, they are said to be able to cross galaxies, but people who believe they're out there want to know why aliens want to visit Earth. A group of former U.S. servicemen is convinced extraterrestrials are interfering with nuclear weapons, as RT's Cedric Moon explains.
Our missiles began going into what's called a no-go condition or unlaunchable. Essentially, they were disabled.
Detailed in this report, full of court-sanctioned sworn affidavits.
The witnesses have described these craft as disc-shaped or cylindrical-shaped or spherical.
These are men who might know what may have gone on. They're former Air Force missile launch officers, missile base officers, who say UFO spaceships, flying saucers, make nuclear weapon systems go haywire.
What I tell people is that the reason it's hidden in plain sight is that the establishment doesn't want people to know, not so much that there's life out in the universe. There's 2/3 of the public believes that there's intelligent life somewhere out there. Over half believe we've been visited, all right? And this is consistent in polls. It's the technology. How do you put something like that up in the sky and move it, no sound, completely quiet? You're not dealing with fossil fuels. You're not dealing with conventional rockets. You're dealing with an entirely new area of physics, which, if it was disclosed, would mean the end of big oil, the end of the petrodollar, the end of public utilities as we know it. It would be an entirely new energy paradigm. And so the macroeconomic power behind the secrecy is what no one's been looking at. And this is what the Minister of Defense of Canada and I did a press conference on a few years ago, Paul Hellyer, and I did a press conference about this, that it's the energy and technology part of this story that has led to the extreme secrecy and also the extreme ridicule.